This is Groundeffected. This is Groundeffected. My name is your dad, and welcome to your mum. This is Groundeffected. My name is your dad, and this video is sponsored by Epic Prop. So Epic Prop had asked me if I would make their latest release. This model was released yesterday. Technically that was the 29th of October 2022. Today is not the 29th of October, but I'm releasing this video today and hopefully you enjoy it. So as many people know, if you've been watching my channel, you'll know that I've moved recently over to my new studio and currently things are all over the place. I have no idea where any of my paints are and I'm trying to find stuff as I'm working, so things might be a bit weird. I'm airbrushing into a box right now, which is even weirder. I've moved from my nice table at home to an even better studio and I'm using a box as my set. This will be changed soon, hopefully, but just try and enjoy what you see so far. As you can see, I painted a base layer of blue over the top of my black base coat for this white dress. I then added a white ink over the top of that, and that brought out the white that I needed and gave me the colors that I needed for the piece. I'm trying something different with the skin tones this time. This skin set is one of the plain skin sets that you can get from Vallejo colors, and it's not the fairy flesh set, but I'm starting out with the darker color in there and I'm using that as my base. Unfortunately, I don't think this is dark enough for a base tone for skin tones for a white dude, and so I needed to give it a bit more depth and also some life. And to do this, I used Magos Purple. This is a contrast color, but it airbrushes really well. You don't have to thin this down. Unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure if this will still be available, but I think, as far as I know, the contrasts are still going to be available. So if you would like to use it, you could probably find it in your local Games Workshop store. I then found one of the oranger colors, and the reason I use this color is because I'm now trying to find the mid-tones for my skin. Actually, technically, this is actually the color of the skin, so this would be the main color that you see. I'm still going to need to darken this down, but I'll do this a little bit later and probably use a wash to do that. I'm going to go over all the parts and I'm going to use just a top-down method of highlighting these parts. It is one of the easiest ways to just get a nice volumetric light on the model without actually doing anything too technical. Just remember that the top is where the light comes from, so every part that you paint, you're kind of just highlighting from the top and shadowing from the bottom. Here you can see me using a wash to go into the areas that need a little bit more depth, so in the shadows and things like that. And then I'm going to start working on the coat that goes around this guy. Unfortunately, this dude, the way he's cut is a little bit difficult to work with. So I would say this is probably a little bit more on the difficult end of scale for modeling, mainly because what you have to do is paint certain parts, glue some things together, and then continue painting parts after you've done that if you want to be able to paint this thing correctly. So the way that I chose to do it was by masking off and working on this inner section first, making sure this was completely painted. I used masking tape and liquid mask to make sure that I masked this area well, and while the masking liquid was drying, I went in to add the final highlight on the skin tones of the model, and this is one of the brightest or lightest colors that I could find in that Vallejo skin set. Now on the face, he has a little bit of this power stuff coming out, so in order to highlight that a bit, I just gave that a nice fluorescent pink highlight, basically just sprayed it around the socket of his eye, and while I was at it, I added some of this to this clearish pink resin, which I made by adding alcohol ink into my resin, the clear resin that I put in my printer, and printed them. They came out kind of pinkish. This fluorescent color is really great for adding the highlights that you need for something like this magic power. Let me talk to you about today's sponsor of this video, Epic Prop. Epic Prop is a new Patreon which creates 1 to 2 models monthly for you to download. The kind of models that they make I will be showing you right now. Also, Epic Prop has told me that for the next 15 patrons to join their Patreon, there will be an option for a $7 tier. Now, of course, if you'd like to support the channel and support the people who support the channel, then make sure to check the link in the description for Epic Prop and what they like to do on their Patreon. Let's just get straight back into painting the Watcher. Getting back to the eyes, I'm gonna actually start by painting that eye that has the power in it. I have already given this a dark coat at first. This is the way that I usually paint eyes. I paint black down first, and then I put the nice whitish of the eyes over the top of that. This just frames them nicely and gives them a good solid foundation, and they look good for me. If you like to do eyes differently, you're more than welcome to do them however you want to do them. This is the way I do my eyes. For the gold on this model, I'm going to use bronze, and this is only because the coverage is really good on this paint. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Monument Hobbies Pro Acrylic metallics are really great, specifically the bronze color. Just that one, and dark silver, by the way. They're both really good coverage paints. For the base, I'm going to try something a little bit different. I know that these paints are kind of not compatible. I'm not really sure what is in the rubber and tires one from Ammo by Mig, but it does not mix very well unless you physically mix it really hard, and by doing a little bit of a squirt and a mix, it kind of gives this really cool marble effect. For the rest of the coat, I'm going to work on painting that dark deep blue. I'm going to start out with a mid-tone blue, and I'm going to probably highlight that, but I'm also going to leave a little bit of the black underneath so that that creates some of the shadows. I'm not going to work too closely to the seam at the back because I am going to come back and paint this again. I tried to use some of this turbo dork on the magic effect on the base. Realistically, it was a waste of time. It didn't give the effect I wanted, and so I grabbed Azumin Blue, which is a contrast paint, and I sprayed this into the bottom of those magic pieces just to give it the color that I saw in the renders. I then used that bronze and I went back in and I painted some of the details that are meant to be golden, or at least golden looking, on the robe, and also his gloves and things. He's got golden bits all over him, so I used the bronze to create the base coat for this. I'm gonna start gluing things together now because it's time to start putting this model together so I can paint the rest of it. I used 5-minute epoxy for this because I feel like the bond will be so much better over time. Something like super glue might become a bit fragile and crack apart later on, especially with something that has been kind of press fitted together. In this way, it's gonna make sure that this model won't just fall apart on my shelf one day. There will be a little gap when you do something like this. No matter how good your printing, sanding or prep is, you probably will have a tiny little gap. My gap was pretty big, but in this case it was really easy to fill with a little bit of milliput. I basically just rolled the string out and I squished it into the place, and then I took my sharp knife and I just wet that with a bit of water so that it glides really easily through the stuff, and I basically just trim off the excess. I kind of came in with my thumb and rubbed out some of the pieces just to kind of soften them and smooth them off a bit, and I left that to dry. While that was drying, I worked on the eyes by laying down the base coat of black on the eye that was left over from the magic face and on both the eyes of the other grumpy face. I then went back in and reinforced the white on the magic eye, and I then added the whites into the other eye. By the way, this is not actually white. It looks white. I say white because it looks white. It's not white, it's deck tan. The color that I used for this is a great color for that. I went back into the base once it had dried with that fluorescent pink and gave it a bit of a slight OSL glow coming from the magic. I then took Resin Flesh Shade and I threw that onto the little holes and gaps on the metallic gold pieces just to create a bit more depth in them. And while that stuff was all drying, I went in and I glued these magic bits to the base. Again, I used 5-minute epoxy because it just sticks really well, and I know for a fact it's gonna last forever. Once the magic was glued in and holding strong, I made sure to glue his feet in as well, just because they needed a little bit more extra strength. And once they were stuck, I glued the top down, and that's where I called the model done. Hopefully you managed to learn something in this video that might help you in your future painting and building of miniature and models and statue things. And if you did find something that helps you making your next project, then maybe you want to consider looking at the Patreon. Over on the Patreon, you will get nothing. However, you will get access to the private Discord in which you can share your artwork as well as share and deal in tips and tricks of the painting variety. Now, of course, I must say a super special thank you to my Patreons as well as the new Patreon we got this week, and that is S. Saitama. I must thank you so much for allowing these lights to blind my eyeballs and making all of this possible. Now, this is the best part of any video that I will ever make. Of course, this is the time where I tell you, if you didn't like anything you saw in this video, you can just fuck off. Now I've got to find a place to put old Oruta the Watcher. Where you going, bruh? Where you want to go?